and I've got to obtain pleasures. My happiness is pleasure. My happiness is getting nice things, is having lots of money, is having £10,000 in the bank or £1 million in the bank, is having nice clothes, is having nice people around me. And all of that is an absolute lie. Well, the mind and that energy is focused on that, then what I'm talking about will always be covered, or seemingly covered. It wants to constantly focus on pleasure, 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 getting these pleasures. Me, 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 me. What I choose, what I choose, what I choose. So much importance on this choice, because the idea, the game that's played is I've got to choose pleasure. I've got to get to pleasure. And my life is terrible if I don't get pleasure, if I don't obtain these pleasures. And that's the lie. It's an absolute lie. Happiness, or the freedom that's looked for, is. It is. It's an absolute illusion, this game. It's a hide and seek. But it wants to keep focusing on that game, not for any particular reason, just because that's the mechanism of it. Just like the flower grows, and the flower grows towards the sun, so does that looking energy and that personal energy keep looking for better situations. It's so obvious that that's going to happen with complicated thinking. It's going to focus too much on environment and situation as being what creates happiness and rest. Of course that's what's going to happen if you think about it logically. As soon as there's an ability to think, it's going to think about environment, making this the best possible environment. And there's nothing wrong with that gentle movement towards more pleasurable things, but when that becomes the truth, that the situation is happiness, then it's endless suffering, because you're trying to grasp onto something that cannot be grasped, because all situations, everything is moving and changing. So every time you get it, you'll lose it. You get the beautiful flower, and then it begins to rot. Get the perfect partner, and then they find someone else. You have the moment of the pleasure, and then it's gone. You cannot hold anything. There is no thing. That's the trick of it. There is no thing. Everything's changing. If everything's changing, there's nothing. There's just oneness. If everything is constantly moving, there's no thing you can possibly grab onto. There is no separate things in that movement. There is no divide. And to that energy of looking, this sounds like craziness. If we were to go and sit and say this in a shopping mall, this would just sound like craziness. What do you mean? How could you say that my happiness, what I'm looking for, isn't in my situation? How can you say it's not in having a nice house? I mean, that seems like a logical thing with thinking. Can you say it's not in my environment, or not in my physical health, or the way my body behaves, whether it's a nice body or a horrible body, or a social body or an unsocial body? But then there's this other side that knows this beyond the thinking level, the aliveness of what is. The appearance of it, the appearances were always enough. What was happening was always enough. As a kid, this was so obvious. They're just playing, they're just watching. For no reason, no motive, nowhere to get to, just playing for hours, running through the fields, making up games. For no reason, nowhere to get to, no end goal, no in 10 years' time I'll have got there. It's just play. But this intellectual, kind of conceptual and energetical thing has become so strong. Me, my life, my world. Me, my life, my world. And all of it's on false ideas. The words that we've labelled things aren't actually things. There's not a reality behind the words, but we've taken them to be the absolute truth. This isn't really flower, this is just mystery. It's convenient that we can communicate. That's the way the human works, that communication can happen, but it's not a truth. It's so funny, isn't it? Humans looked and looked and looked and looked and built and grown and built, and it was never in that. It was always in what was happening. It's kind of a bittersweet game. In the education, in the lovers, in the money, in the big house, in the travelling the world, in the yoga, in the enlightenment. It's this. So good morning to people in Ustream. You're more than welcome to ask questions through Skype. Oh, just turn it on. You can call in if you like. It's maybe the nicest way. And if anybody has any questions. And this sounds like this talk's got goals, but it really hasn't. It's like questions come up, and then they dissolve, ideas, but hang on, what about? And then it gets seen that there's no truth in any, including the intellect. But what about if I do this? What about if I go there? Or all these different questions. And it's not like there's a goal, it's just life seeming to expose a lie. So this is from somebody called Richard. I'm currently in Spain, just about to start a new job, and I feel I don't want to stay here, that I want to return to the UK. I feel like I'm in a moment of choice. Is it true, though, that there is no one actually choosing anything, that what will be will be? Thank you for your help, Richard. That's true. Well, it's not actually that that's true. There's nothing that's true, but it's the assumption is that in most body mind mechanisms, a game and thinking comes up of I am choosing, I made a choice, and who, where did the thought come from? Who did the thought come from? I am going to choose to stay in Spain. Where did that thought come from? The assumption is there's an energy or a ball of somebody inside the body making choices. But they just appear like everything else appears. And they're not separate from anything else. From this big mystery. But they don't appear from an actual separate entity that's acting independently. In them, they suggest that there's a separate independent entity. So in the thought, it suggests that there is someone. I am making a choice. I am choosing to stay here. In the actual thinking and the energy of it implies a separate entity. But who chooses that thought? I am choosing to stay in Spain. Where does it come from? There's only somebody in an appearance, in a thought. It's not an actuality, but my God, has that really become an incredibly rich dream. I am choosing. Who is choosing? Right here, right now, who chooses? Who breathes? Who sees? Who hears? It's this vast, endless, big mystery. And this is the freedom, the energy changing from me, my choice, my life, and this contracted, tight energy to this boundless emptiness and fullness simultaneously. Who chooses? That I trust you, the personal energy will fixate on choices and pleasure, because that's what choices are about. I choose and I get more pleasure, I get a better life. There is no better life, it's all forms appearing and disappearing. There can be somebody free, sitting in a prison, in a tiny little jail, and there's no entity in there. I'm sorry to, Sedan always says, don't bring up this subject. Well, maybe I won't. Okay, let's think of something else. There could be somebody being hit, beaten up, and there's nobody inside of the body, and the hitting is happening in absolute freedom. It's so full on this, though, because the mind is constantly fixated on me, pleasure. Me, good circumstance, and constantly looking at circumstance for freedom. There's no freedom in circumstance. It's always appearance of pleasure and pain, and circumstance is always in movement. Whatever's happening is always in movement. Sorry, there's no middle way here. Some speakers speak about this in a lot more gentle way, but let's just get to it. Who chooses? Who is separate? Who's there? And the mind just boggles and goes, I just don't get it. And it's that boggling that's it. You're never going to get it as a thought. It's impossible. Who chooses? Well, that will never be able to be put, who chooses. But it might begin to loosen that energy of it's me choosing. Who? Who chose? Who drove? Who sung? Who spoke? Who breathed? Who went to the toilet? Me, me, me. Who? This body. Who's inside the body? Me. Who? The chooser, the doer. My actions. Such a strong dream. And choice is one of the most juiciest dreams. Choice. I choose. And then it's not the opposite. It's not that there's somebody there not choosing. That sounds like what I'm saying. It's the collapse of both worlds which I'm talking about. And both become irrelevant. But I have to kind of talk in the opposite to point out the illusion. And then the opposite that I'm speaking, saying there's no body, there's no chooser, just is absolute nonsense at the end of the day. But it's just trying to point to that lie that's appearing.
So if somebody asks me for advice, let's say, so I'm a teacher or a friend or a sister, it doesn't really matter if I say go left, go right, go up, go down.
It might be more pleasurable, but that's all.
Or down.
Yeah.
Or just say do what you want to do, because that's what they're going to do, what they're programmed to do anyway.
Yeah.
They really don't have any choice of what they're going to do. So what I'm going to say, it sounds very like if I want to choose to have a more truthful life and say, I don't know what you should do.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's more truthful. Even if you said to the body, you should eat more food or something to another body, it's not you saying it and them hearing it. It's just part of life appearing, just like the tree grows and the water falls for the tree to grow. It's just another part of that flow, of that movement. And there's nobody that's saying it and nobody that's hearing it.
If I say I don't know what to do, what do you think is best?
Yeah, best, I mean.
What's best, I mean.
Yeah. Everything's moving, so how can we find best?
But if I say to them, oh, well, everything's moving, and they just say, I never ask her, and oh, that's better too. Won't be bothered.
That would be hilarious if someone said, do you think I should go to school today? Do you think that's best? And you're like, well, everything's moving, so I don't know. I'd be like, woo! That would be such a funny answer.
So the answer will just appear. If someone says, what do you think it's better if I take a sick leave, or if I go to Spain, or go to this talk, or meditate?
Yeah, but just like that speaking's happening, so will action happen. Like that speaking is happening so quickly. It's not somebody's action. And sometimes it will come with a thought, what should I say? But that's just thought appearing. It's not an actual somebody that's thinking that. It's just appearing, what shall I say? But that's just a description of what's happening. It's not somebody in there.
Something, speech will just happen spontaneously.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
A lot, yeah. Yeah.
Voice is from the abyss.
Because I couldn't even choose to say, well, I'm not going to give anyone any advice, no matter how much they say. But Phyllis, you know a lot of things. What should I read? Should I learn to meditate?
Yeah, and then suddenly you might be like, hey, you should read this. But it's not somebody in there doing that. It's just appearing.
Phyllis, you'll say whatever you would say.
Huh?
You'd just say whatever you would say.
Is that, what I'm programmed to say, yeah?
Well, you could say programs, but whatever Phyllis would do, that's what you would do.
That's what I'll do.
How can you get the thoughts that appear in you weren't meant for somebody else?
No. Yeah, they're not for somebody.
You said something bizarre.
I said it's something bizarre. Yeah, but it could be bizarre.
Yeah. It could be, the reply could be, well, everything's in movement, so we just don't know. I would love to hear you say that.
I've done that. My colleague said, yes, she's the one that walked out of that big marriage, too. Right? Okay. But it's, well, so, like, we're really like little action toys, like wind up toys.
The body is, The body is absolutely caged in its programming. So here's another question saying, what is the story behind you initially starting to teach non-duality? Well, I mean, with stories, it's always like, well, where do we start? Do we start at the moment when the parent made love? Well, first of all, has anybody ever seen The Goonies? This film called The Goonies. Do you remember when the little fat kid? They ask him, "How did you get here?" or something, or "Why are you here?" And then he starts at like basically when he was born or something. It just goes on for ages. And like they were like the baddies that had caught him, and they're like trying to catch his friends and like, "Why are you here?" And he's like, "Well, I was born to da 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 da." Where do we start in the story? At what point does anything start? We could just make something up. Like we could say, okay, we're going to start when the first time Lisa spoke, or we'll describe the situation, but we'll miss out lots of things. We'll miss out going for a poop, or going for a wee. We'll miss out all the internet emails, or all these things. We'll just take a summary of this nice little contained story, which isn't wrong. That's okay. Communication happens. But we so often take these stories to be an actuality, which they're not at all. So now I'm just trying to think where to start, or the thoughts are coming, where to start in the story. Which bits to pull out. Or should we just say don't know?
The good parts.
The good parts, the exciting parts. Yeah.
Once you said it was because you needed a job.
Yeah.
You needed the money.
Yeah. It was. Well, in that little bit of the story, if we start from this angle, it was the money was running out, and people asked me to do this meditation thing, and I was like, okay. So that was one part. We could start from before that as to when we got money and then lost money.
Yes.
The point is, there is no story at all. That's the point.
Yeah.
And it's funny that everything else is appearing the same way as stories appear. Stories appear in the same way as
Everything
this
else.
appears.
Yeah.
When we're so focused on the story,
Yeah.
which is not really happening.
No.
Lisa.
Yeah.
There is a story.
Yeah.
And there is an energy that keeps the story going on. And then I get a feeling, so the only thing, and that's again part of the story, but the only thing I can do is wait till that energy maybe opens up.
How do you do waiting?
Yeah, I don't know, I can't wait. But
Like,
yeah, up with a knife. But it seems like every time I get in the story, again, in the story, and then I think, what can I do? I can do nothing. So every time I get a feeling, so the only thing I can do, I don't know, I know I can't do anything. It seems like waiting till that energy is.
I wouldn't even say it's not that you can't do anything. You is an appearance. So it's not that you can do anything or not do anything. Doing will happen. There's no you there that's acting. But yeah, it can seem.
I try to understand.
It can seem like that you've been waiting and waiting, and the story comes back. But really, does it right here, right now? Has the story ever come back?
No. And then there is no waiting.
Yeah. But it's such a mind trick, this, and it's so simple because the mind wants something else, and it's just coming back. It seems like it's coming back. This story. There's been many times where I've fallen out of this, and it's all a lie. It's all a game. There's nobody that's ever fallen out of anything. And then the mind comes up and goes, but I have.
Yeah.
It's such a trickster. It can be seemingly incredibly painful because when it starts telling, it uses time in a really funky way. It uses time to what's that word? Like not highlight, elongate anything. So it's like, okay, I've been waiting 10 years or 20 years or 40 years for this story to fall away, and it hasn't. And it uses that 40 years. It's an absolute lie, this. But it uses that appearance and imagination of 40 years to increase this energy of despair or whatever it's being felt. And there's never been any 40 years, and then or it says things like, oh, I've had 40 years of terrible relationships, or 40 years of parents who never loved me. And so much of our psychology and psychologists encourage this kind of storytelling, and it's actually just the cutting of that. It's not the fixing it, going into it. It's the collapsing of that. It's the rawness of it. The sensation comes up of absolute lack. That's the original sense, and then it tries to make sense of that. I've had 40 years of not getting enlightened, and then it adds and adds and adds. And the original feeling is I'm not enough. That's all the division is. The first division was I'm not enough. That sensation of lack. I am separate. But then I can feel the story then going, yes, but I've listened to this so many times and I still don't get it. And it's such a lie, this thought. It's such a trickster. But then it goes, no, but. Ah!
And in that 40 years, only one imagination. In one imagination.
Yeah, the 40 years only exists here.
40 years.
Yeah.
Now, 40 years
Yeah.
only in one imagination.
Yeah.
And then when it falls, there's no 40 years.
But that's not the catch-22 part. You have to be there to see that.
Well, no, not really you. It's
It's when there, for me, it's collapsed that you see that. But if a person is functioning with a strong me, they say, oh, look at her, she's got it and I don't, huh?
Yeah.
And I've done all this work. And,
All these games,
yeah, and it can make it even feel more painful, huh?
Yeah.
But that idea also happening in an empty
Yeah.
space, not to anyone. That me, it also is happening.
I agree,
know.
yes, yeah, exactly. But until you get it, until there's no me to get that there's none of that exists, huh? There's still going to be suffering.
Seems that way, yeah.
It seems that there's agreement to what you say. There's not that.
There is so much importance to it in your story. They'll never stop.
Okay.
But that story is not important. When you think that you're the story, then the story continues. But you are not I'm in the story. Story is appearing in this to no one. Your story is appearing, but it's not yours. It's not personal. Any story is not personal.
And there's this resonance, hearing those words. It's not you feeling it, it's like a knowing of this. There's this knowing, and you hear these sort of words, and even though all words are bullshit, but you can kind of maybe sometimes hear it. And then there's something that knows this. I can see sometimes the bodies and they come alight when these sort of words, not that they're truth. Hello, Sanjay. There's something Richard called ad blocker. Ad blocker missed most of the answer because the ads came, which you can download, or you could buy space or time, ad-free time from Ustream. I can't answer these questions for you, Elliot. You're saying who asked the question and who is answering. I can't really answer it. I mean, we can point and use lots of different words and try to point at that emptiness, but So if you're joining Ustream, you're more than welcome to ask questions if you feel like. You can call in or write them on Skype. You might be noticing how important I am as I have some flowers next to me. I also have some flowers on this side as well, and another bunch there, and one more. Blah, blah. Very important person. VIP. This is it. I know that can be that can seem really painful when that energy is like, no, this isn't it. Something else better. I want something better. So then there's another part. Oh yeah, this is it. This is knowing. This is it. This is it. This is it. No, hang on. If I manage to get this is it. You can't make it better. This is it. It's just forms appearing and disappearing, appearing and disappearing. And all forms are subject to that. Appear, disappear, appear, disappear. There's no one solid form. It's always in movement. You get a microscope and you'll never be able to find the edge of the body.
Lisa?
Yes.
So when this thought arises, like, I must do this, or must do that, is it like just not touching it?
But who can then not touch it? It just appears and then it disappears. I mean, I don't really understand what's happening here, just like I don't understand how the flowers grew or how the walls or floor is appearing. But it seems to be that this is being spoken, it seems to get listened to, and then there seems to be a crumbling of that energy. But it's as soon as I tell you a way to get there, it becomes something else. And it's like trying to I think it's innocent. It's like it's more of an innocent thing, these talks. It's like listening to these talks, and then it's not so goal orientated of next time a thought comes up and this will happen. It's like the thought will come up and either an energy will come up afterwards to carry on going into those thoughts, or that won't happen. If I say yes, don't get involved with it, then it's encouraging that other thought that says I am the doer.
Yes, okay.
It's just a funny game, all this.
Funny, yes.
But it might be after hearing these talks or during these talks that energy is collapsing, but it's collapsing in an innocent way. It's not you collapsing it. But then if the body-mind mechanism finds itself listening to a teacher who says don't get involved with your thoughts, then that's also the perfect expression of it as well. It's not the way it's expressed here. And then another thought comes up and goes, okay, don't get involved with that thought. I'm not going to get involved with that thought. But it's never you doing it. It's just that's what's appearing. But with those speakers, it sometimes might give an appearance that you're liberating yourself, but there's nobody there liberating themselves. There's appearances happening, loads of different appearances in this boundless emptiness. This emptiness that is everything and no one thing. There's no one thing. There's nothing.
Yeah. So it's like a complete, what is it, free fall?
Yeah, it's a dropping into... And then the intellect just goes back to its natural place. The intellect is just a functioning that the humans have, just like the owls have supervision to see the movement of mice to eat them. The body is very much just about survival. It's very simple, in a way, programming. It eats, poops and bonks. That's what it does. It's a reproducing machine. Who was it the other day that's like, was it you, me, that was going, well, somebody was making me chuckle, they're like, we're just walking stomachs. Yes. Stomachs and reproduction organs. And so the thinking just goes to the natural, back to natural kind of survival, just functioning, rather than being who you are. So. That personal energy is mostly surviving on what I do and where I'm going, what I choose. It's so funny. Who made up the word doer, chooser? Why did they have to make up that word? It became so confusing.
So it's not about accepting or rejecting.
No,
It's,
but it's the collapse of that one that is in resistance to what's happening, that thinks that it's controlling it. See, some speakers speak in the positive, and last night I was saying I'm a negative speaker. I'm always talking about what isn't, rather than you accepting. I would say it's the end of the one that's resisting.
yeah, I mean, like, even when you reject something, even when you're caught up in the story,
Yeah.
that's still it.
Yeah.
So even when you're not enlightened, you're still enlightened.
Everything is enlightened. Yeah. There's not even a you there that is enlightened. It's just everything is enlightened always.
Yeah.
Everything is it.
So, and even like whatever you do, it's still it.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing anything, it's still it.
Yeah. It's just that energy just gives the appearance that it's not it. It's always saying this is wrong slightly.
Yeah.
Better.
So it's always it, but when you start doing either accepting or rejecting something, then, or like the only thing you can actually do is create that kind of split. In the moment you're doing something, you're creating duality which isn't actually there.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's you doing it, but that's what's appearing, giving the appearance of you, accepting or rejecting it.
If you tell yourself that you need to accept, and it's just it's just more duality.
Yeah,
it's just
but it's still it.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's still appearing in boundless freedom. It's just with it normally comes. the sense of aboundedness to it, but it's not bounded. I mean, even now, so say if there's a contracted energy of this is wrong or this is uncomfortable, it's still boundless. Where does that contracted energy start and stop? That boundless energy, that contracted energy is everywhere. Like, so say if there's a sense of, like this, and it might feel like it's inside the body, but actually it's everywhere. That contractedness is always appearing everywhere. That sometimes really doesn't work for people. There's no start and stop to anything ever. Even that contracted energy, it's all boundless. But it just gives an appearance of inside, outside, me, my life. And this tightness, and it feels like when there's tightness there, sometimes it's hitting against the world, against other people, like they've done this to me. There's actually never a me there. That me, even if it feels strong that me is there inside, it's actually always everywhere. It's just a game. So somebody's just asking if someone who's awakened can be mistakenly given a psychiatric diagnosis. He says, I know a person who certainly has awoken, but seems confused because he forgets stuff. I think for sure, yeah. Yeah. they can end up in the loony bin. And I sometimes often think that humans that have learning difficulties, like quite severe learning difficulties, there's not a personal sense there. And it's so funny because our society thinks they're retarded and backwards. And I think a lot of people with learning difficulties or Asperger's or autism, often there's no personal sense of self there. And to us, it's really bizarre behaviour.
Yeah, like Down syndrome, they cannot identify with the ego.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating. I used to work with kids with emotional behavioural disorders, learning difficulties, physical difficulties, and it's fascinating to watch because we want to look at the behaviour of the body to reflect enlightenment to us. And I remember this one Down syndrome kid. She was maybe like 10, and her favourite game, and it wasn't a game to her. She didn't have a sense she was playing. She just acted it out when it was break time, and she used to like to put all the men in prison. So, so she was a right little Nazi about it. And she had this one little slave boy that followed her around and did things for her all the time. And she loved it. And this other one loved it as well, the other one that was the slave boy. But they didn't have a sense we're playing. It was just, that was the urge and energies that wanted to come out. And she'd hit him as well if he didn't do what she wanted. She'd boom. But they didn't have a sense they were playing. It was just what was happening. The instincts of the body was to have a slave boy. It really used to make me chuckle. But we want to look at the body and see enlightenment in the body, like in a body, and say, okay, this is what enlightenment looks like. The body's always caged to its conditioning and to its situation. Maybe she was copying her parents. So then that would be that story for that body. Yeah. Boom, and she was. But the funny thing was the other boy with the Down syndrome was he never ever had any issue with this. He always seemed, and if you gave him a choice, like if you said you want to go there, he would always follow her.
It's a society that wants to fix these children.
Yeah.
That
wants
think that they're not enough, huh?
Yeah.
They can't be enough because that means all my trying to improve myself and looking at that means it's just all
hopeless.
useless.
Yeah.
So we fix them and they don't need to, or there's an attempt to fix.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fixing happens, or an attempt, which will always be total failure.
Yeah. There was this other little boy. This one was really funny. He always used to like to play with himself, not sexually. He wasn't old enough for that. But he always used to be touching himself, and this used to freak all the teachers out all the time. It was like he was like the biggest no-no. This 8-year-old boy touching. You do not sit there and do that. It wants the person wants to cover up the messy. It just wants pretty. What an agonising thing to try and do, just pretty.
Yeah, and you cannot give any definition to it.
No. No.
What is the prettiness? Nobody knows.
It's always subjective.
And every behavior in mentally limited persons, that same behavior is in non-limited mental behavior. It's the same behavior actually. Still behavior as human as one. There's no difference.
Yeah.
We only recognize it in somebody else, and we don't want to recognize it in ourselves. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's why we hide them away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there was sometimes that sadness, but I guess it's part of the story. I've taught emotionally disturbed children in a black neighborhood in New York, in a very poor, their children were very poor to begin with, and they came from very disturbed homes where the parents were either alcoholic or drug addicts or abandoned them. So they were disturbed children who would just throw everything and hit them. And the whole point of the class was to get them to be calm, which is okay. That was okay. It felt okay like that, the calm. But it was very fragile, and they were just acting out all the violence of the world. And the saddest thing happened. This was over 50 years ago, and it still stays with me in the heart. It was the best part sometimes with having the story reading, huh? And we tell them about having a story to go to bed. And I would read to the children, huh? And they would stay calm enough to listen to the end of the story. And one little girl was on my lap, huh? And she said to me, she said, Mrs. Smith, when I grow up, will I become white, huh?
Oh,
Will I get to be white like you? And it was like, oh God, huh?
Yeah.
It was all wrong. The whole, can't say wrong, but in this little child of 5 or 6, it was like the whole suffering of all the racism, or that the behavior. It's just that story, but that I couldn't fix it. I resigned finally.
And this is what
I couldn't do it. Huh?
this is what begins to happen. Is the personal energy imagines when the personal energy collapses. So it imagines liberation as a constant state of bliss or pleasure, but it's a full on. It's not you acceptance of this. So it's incredibly sad and painful as well. Like, it's really sad when you see something suffering and there's no story that's saying it could be different, it should be different, it's just as it is. So there's dog bleeding to death, or in Thailand I saw a dog run over and its insides were coming out of its bottom. And I just picked it up and took it to the vets so they could give it morphine. It's like full sadness, and then in that sadness there's the beauty and the freedom. It's like full pain because it's not that this shouldn't happen. That's it. This has happened.
It's a falling away maybe of the part. I should fix it. Huh?
And it should be. Well, the body still went to fix it. The body still went and took it.
The body went to alleviate the suffering of another body.
But it's the end of the hope, the idea that this can be different than the world of opposites, growth, death. It's so full on, this, but it's never really dying because there's no one thing. Like, it's all the same thing, but in the apparent separation, it's constant growth, destruction, movement into other things. As soon as something gets really beautiful, it begins to rot and turn into something else. It's really beautiful and great and to watch when it's in its growth, and then the rot and the destruction's the sad part. It can't be got away from. It's full on, but we love it. We love the fact that it moves. Like, we love that as well. Without the movement, like. I was just going to say, without the movement, there would be nothing happening, but there is actually nothing happening. You can't really say that, but I'm trying. The movement is it, but how do you even get to this in words?
The movement is inevitable.
Yeah.
Anything that lives has cells that move.
Yeah, it then turns into something else.
When there's the death of that.
Yeah.
Of the cells.
Yeah. And this dog was so cute. It was white, and we'd just been giving it food, and because we gave it food, it then got squashed. It came over the road, and then when it went back, it got squashed. So there's no nice action. Screw the idea of you're doing a nice action. And then it was so sweet. It was called Snowdrop, and then it was Red Drop. Terrible. I know I'm laughing now, but I mean, at the time I was like, oh.
You named the dying dog.
No, it was my friend.
Oh.
She knew it. She was like a
Snowdrop.
I know.
Red Drop.
I couldn't tell the little girl, no, you're never going to grow up to be white and pretty and smart. You're going to be condemned to be black and stupid and emotionally disturbed and probably a drug addict. And all end very badly in a prison. But that's more than likely. That's, who knows, but that's what.
Yeah.
I couldn't say, no, you're not going to. It's easier to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you become wiped up.
That story is not belong to her.
Beautiful.
That
No,
story
but it
is
was a story. It was a story that there was a suffering in me, because I couldn't fix it at that time.
But that story is appearing in the empty space, not to her.
Yeah, now it's seen as you say. But at the time I saw this sad little girl who loved me so much. You know, she was just clinging to the book. It was very emotional. And yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite story, like a Zen story or some other spiritual story?
I really like the Buddhist story of I never can pronounce his name, of Agulamala. Agulamala. You heard that one about the 90 fingers around his neck, 99 fingers around his neck.
Just one.
One
searching for one.
But such a one more to have 100. So he lived in the forest, and every time somebody walked through the forest, he'd kill them and chop off their finger. And then I'm not saying this has got any meaning to it, like the story. I just like it. and then he takes the little finger and he puts it around. And he has this big necklace, and everyone's petrified of him, so nobody goes through the forest. And then the Buddha's going to walk that way, and everyone's like, "Don't go there! Don't go there! He's going to kill you and chop off your finger." And then he gets to the Buddha. He sees the Buddha, Agulamala, and decides to chase the Buddha and kill her and get the last finger. And he's running and running and running and running, but he can't ever catch up with the Buddha. And he eventually says, How come you're walking so fast? How come I can't catch up with you?" And the Buddha just turns around and goes, "I'm perfectly still. It's you that's moving too fast." And that's the end of the story. I like that one. There was this body, or whatever you want to call it, was a Buddhist for a long time. And then there was a bit more to the story, and then he got it, and everything collapsed, and then eventually he got stoned to death by the locals. So he went around with the Buddha as a monk for a while.
Yeah.
And then eventually the locals were so angry at him about what, you killed my loved ones, and then in one village they stoned him to death. And he's dead. Then then goes into the ground, then a tree grows. Whatever. Fertilizer. You missed the best bits. We had a strip, a dance, we had the music on, everyone naked. The band was sleeping.
Such a good energy there. Upstairs with the woman.
You were upstairs with the women?
I slept in the beds from the woman there.
Ah.
7 women.
Ah, you did.
In her bed.
Ah.
She sleeps also. Teacher.
Very nice yoga this morning.
Yeah, you enjoyed it?
Yes.
Someone has to do it again? Someone?
Yeah.
Lisa, is there energy without thought? Or is it always that there first is the thought and then the energy comes along?
Yeah, I don't know which one comes first actually. Some speakers say that it's the energy that comes thoughts first, claiming stuff. The only thing that I can kind of compare it to is animals. The animals, they don't have suffering, they don't have a sense of self, and they don't have complicated thinking, so that kind of implies that the complicated thinking comes first and then the energy. But I really don't know how it happens, but it's a combination of thoughts, feelings, and an energy that creates that sense of self, and it feels like everything's coming from you in here, wherever it is. It seems to move. The chakras seem a very good pointer to the places it moves to, the sense of you. So it might be that the complicated thinking is the first thing. I don't know. The fact that we can comprehend the idea that of a body, I am a body, and then I move through time, and then that becomes an energetical expression, maybe. Other people say different things. The truth is nobody really can say anything that's true or really get to it. It's not of the right concepts, it's just the absence or the collapse of the wrong concepts or the wrong idea. So Elliot, who asked the question earlier about putting somebody in a psychiatric hospital, he then says, what diagnosis do you think they will give an apparent awakened person? Psychotic? Schizophrenia? I don't know. Maybe psychotic or psychosis or something.
There's actually something called depersonalization.
Yeah.
Syndrome, huh?
I've heard of that.
If you go to the psychiatrist, talk and say, I don't know who I am, huh? So you have depersonalization syndrome. That's a psychotic.
Yeah.
Personalization is that.
You know, you should ask Paul about this because Paul knows all the scientific. Like I've heard him say stuff about this before, about what actually happens in the brain. But I've forgotten.
Yeah. Maybe it's a change in the chemicals.
Yeah, it's a chemical thing.
Yeah, that's depersonalization. You're on the blacklist.
Yeah.
Go.
But somebody sent me.
Like a therapy for you to personalize you again.
I don't think they know how to do that. You can't. I've heard that you can't put the thing back in the box. Put the jack in the box. Jack in the box. Is that understand? Yeah. When it's escaped, you can't put it back in. So they have to just give you antipsychotic medicine.
Yeah, imagine if you're sitting there like, I am a person. I am a person.
No.
I am a person. I am a human. How do I become a person again?
And that's in the story of this what's happened here. That I won't look in the mirror and say, I don't know who I am, huh? I don't know who she is.
And you went to the doctors?
Well, I was always seeing a doctor.
Ah.
So then that's what it said, it's depersonalization.
Oh, I see.
Antipsychotic medication. Happily it didn't work. No, but I'm sure people I'm not sure anything, but it could be that people get committed to.
But somebody wrote to me recently and said the diagnosis of it is also fear as well. I don't really know.
Oh, sure. You're not normal. You're not like you're supposed to be, yeah? Yeah.
So did we answer that one, Elliot? I wonder if the connection is good. Have a look. Yep. It's good. How's that? She's just like this.
Yeah.
Even the way the eyes go up.
Yeah.
So my dog's very much like your pictures on your... It's always worth a laugh, the oddness of this. It could be, yes.
Lisa?
Yeah.
To you, is there a kind of separation between awareness and what's appearing in it? Or is it just
Sort
one?
of, yeah, that all collapses, yeah. It's just so... Because who would see awareness? How would that even be known?
Yeah, maybe like a sensation that if the things appear and disappear and move and...
But they're also the awareness. So it's all collapses back in. I understand. I like sometimes the way people speak about, and even me, the empty space or beingness, as if it's a separate thing from everything else. But how would you? What is awareness?
Mystery.
And then where does it start and stop? So you can't even define. That can't even be defined. There's no watching or not watching. So.
Yeah, but there is a kind of sensation of stillness, not moving, not changing.
Yeah. There is stillness. Yeah.
It's not changing.
Yeah. The stillness. Yeah. It doesn't feel like a located watching or anything like that. But yeah, there's this absolute emptiness. It's very convenient to call it awareness, though, sometimes when you're speaking about it, or to call it these words, because then it's easier to, if you say consciousness or awareness, to point out the impersonality of it. But then that just collapses with it as well. Then that even becomes like a really warped and bizarre idea that you are awareness or consciousness. Even stillness and all the rubbish that I say. Still.
Lisa, when you say stillness is still a word.
Yeah.
And it's not a sensation.
Well, we're trying to point to something that's beyond words. Sensation is, everything is stillness. So sensation is stillness, all words are stillness. But then at the same time, it's not a sensation, but it is. Not one particular sensation. This is just amazing. This seems to be there's 22, 3 maybe bodies in this room, and there's not a huge focus on the stories. Isn't that amazing? Because normally that's all that the person is obsessed with is stories, 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 stories. And this question's kind of, and there's nothing wrong if stories come, but it's amazing how much this seems to be getting heard at the moment. Not just my message, but non-duality. It's not about you. It's not about you. And mostly this talk, the last couple of hours, has just been quite direct. We've been talking about non-duality, not going too much into problems and fixing problems. Not that it's wrong, I'm not demonizing anything, it's just the joy that it's resonating so much, non-duality.
Lisa, can you experience a change in your audience, even though there is no change in non-duality?
No, yeah, and this is all bullshit storying, but here we'll go into story. Everything. I said this is all, I'm going to go into a story, but I'm just saying it's all bullshit, everything I say. What happens is when I do talks, is it's like you see the weight in the body sometimes dissolve. the weight just dissolves, and I can't tell you what it looks like, but you can see it, like the audience begins to beam, and it's so much into staying directly to non-duality, but it seems really cruel sometimes, not helping the story or being nice about the story. But it's when you're just keep pointing back to this boundlessness, and you can begin to, and then the weight might come back in, and then it's going, and then it's coming back in, and you could call it a resonance, or I don't even know how you call that word, but that's what seems to happen.
But do you see a change in your audiences? I mean, or is it every time with the audience you experience the same thing? Or
like everything, it's always changing. But there does seem to be more people being interested in non-duality.
Yeah.
More and more, it's growing and growing.
But
maybe
can you
because the
identify
weight.
Something like if you see the collapse of the identity, can you also identify that in a group or only individually?
Like if it's a group, the general group has less identity?
Yeah. Like if you see the collapse in a group.
Yeah.
Or do you see it in an individual?
Sometimes in some talks there's less weight, seemingly.
Yeah.
And in other talks it's more weighty.
As a sensation, if you can say so.
Yeah.
Because my experience for myself is the more I collapse, the more the world collapses at the same time.
Yeah.
So I recognize if I call it an awakening, which it is not, but if I call it an awakening, then the awakening in me is happening simultaneously outside of me at the same time. It is like if you become everybody, like that.
Sort of. Yeah, sort of. But you'll still be able to see suffering. So you'll be sort of in a way, when you dissolve, everybody else dissolves.
Yeah.
But then you'll be sitting with another body mind mechanism, emptiness, 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 and then suddenly, my life's so awful, I hate life, da 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 da, and then the thought might come, they're suffering. It might not, and then it's just sounds appearing.
Yeah, but then if I experience the suffering less as identified with, then I also cannot identify that much suffering outside of me anymore.
Yeah.
You see, like before, I was identifying with conflicts in the world. Politics had a huge interest in me, so everywhere I saw the conflicts.
Yeah.
But it was always the conflict in me. Like one time I was thinking, if I have to explain to a bird that there is a conflict going on, then the bird can only come to the conclusion that there's a conflict in you, because he cannot see what you're talking about. He can only see that you're frustrated about the conflict, so the conflict is in you. And now I experience as this conflicts are a little bit dissolving in me, like they still appear and they go.
You don't see them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just sensation arising, but there can sometimes be description. So if two people are strangling each other, there still could be just watching that and nothing. Just there's just strangling happening and not even the interpretation. Yeah. But more than likely, a thought might arise. They're fighting.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you're seeing entities, or the thought might arise. They're in conflict, but that doesn't mean that you are there in conflict as well, if you see what I mean. Exactly. But it's just a description of the situation. Yeah. But everything does become free as that, like there is just nothing happening. Yeah. And everything happening, but you're no longer in this struggle with yourself and then projecting that struggle everywhere else, because all you ever see is yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Is your personal energy. So if you are seeing a poor animal that's been abused and unloved, like there's no animal unloved. There is a storytelling, but there still might be descriptions appearing as thoughts, like, oh, that animal's getting slaughtered now. But it might not also appear. And then there's just what is.
Yeah, that's exactly like the happening is happening anyway. So whatever you do around it.
But sometimes thoughts are coming up appropriate, and it's like two people are fighting. The thought might come up, two people are fighting, and then the next thought might come up, I should stop this, or the body should stop this. Whatever. But it's just more practical than anything else.
Yeah.
But before, when that me energy is there, all it's seeing is itself everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to talk about this particular part of it. But so this body mind mechanism used to be an animal activist, and what it was seeing all the time was its own death, its own fear, its own abandonment. It was never actually seeing the animal being killed or the animal, in pain. It was seeing its own abandonment. And then this was so important to save this animal because I wanted to save myself. I wasn't compassionate. I thought I was compassionate and better than all the other human beings around me.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean now that this body doesn't stop that.
No, exactly.
It doesn't mean now that this body doesn't give money to stop that. Like all those sort of things.
No, you cannot value it either.
You're not, and you're not saying that's better. And who knows, you might feed something that then goes and kills 10 children. You're not doing a good thing. You're not.
No, exactly.
You're just doing whatever appears in that moment. But it doesn't mean that some descriptions won't appear. So if you describe something as hurting, it's not that you're hurting. You could say it in an ultimate way, like amness. There is hurting in amness, which is not you, like there is hurting happening, which is everything. It's amazing getting into that game with the politics and then believing you're right and someone's wrong and that you're a better person for helping them and you're helping these people.
Yeah.
And it's all about you.
Yeah, exactly. There's nobody asking for you to save the world. Nobody ever asked you, and nobody will ever ask you to save the world.
No.
You only think yourself that you have to save the world.
And it's all made up in a very limited language, saving the world.
But still, I experience or I see, which is not happening for real, but I still see even in that global political moving, I see a huge change. And I see that because I experience that change, not because it's happening there, but it's happening in me. And it becomes so obvious that it is happening. Like before, I carried the conflicts with me, so the conflict was very big. But now I don't carry the conflict with me, so the conflict which appears on the news
is very small.
Yeah, it's very, very small. It has no effect anymore. And I see the politicians who preach this and that. I just see them as puppets which are still believing in themselves. And I even think, but again it's for me, that the biggest stronghold to identities is in politics. Because these are people who think they have to rule the whole world. Yeah. Not only a small part of society or a community, no, they rule the whole world. Like first there was land without any borders, and then suddenly somebody said, okay, this is the border around it. Mm-hmm. So the only thing they can do is create a border around their own world, and simultaneously it's limited to that border. So now I experience the less conflict in me. I cannot see a conflict in that anymore either. Yeah. And that's the good part.
Yeah, and that's what begins to happen with all stories. But then stories will still arise as communication, as descriptions, but they're all just seen as bullshit, as very small, not truths, just functioning, just communication, just fun. Just they're not a reality. There's not a you and me, and they don't carry this important energy. I've got to save the world. It hurts me when they are hurt.
Yeah, but also at the same time, it still is like when the conflict is disappearing in me, it seems like if there is no conflict in the world anymore. Like all these people, we are sitting here now, and I bring forward that sometimes there's a conflict in me, but it's disappearing, and I see it in everybody here disappearing at the same time.
Yeah. But what might
So there
happen
truly
now?
is a world without conflict.
Well, there's a even the world collapses, but
Yeah.
but what might happen? So there is this, and this is absolutely free. It's not any words that we put onto it. But then a body-mind mechanism might scream and cry. It's actually not hurting. It's actually the actual reality is hurting or in pain or somebody in their suffering is all description. But that description might appear. But it's all free. This is absolutely free.
Yeah.
And the whole world begins to disappear.
Yeah.
Then you can't even see a thing, really. There could be these practical descriptions going on, but then what is this other thing? Who's it in relation to?
Yeah, exactly. Who made up the word conflict?
Yeah.
In the beginning.
And the chair. And where did the chair start and stop? It just all begins to... And it's amazing, non-duality, because this is happening by itself. You might think that it's you've begun to see this, but it's all begun to crumble on its own, and you.
I even want to grasp that I am experiencing less of conflict, but there was no conflict to begin with.
No, and no past of anyone going through process. It's quite. I just love this subject. I can't believe, seemingly, and this is just bullshit words that Lisa's speaking. Absolutely mean nothing, but yet the joy comes up. There's 22 body-mind mechanisms sitting in a room talking about fuck all.
And it becomes so easy, actually, because no one can drag you into anything anymore. And still they drag you in, and still you are dragged into it, but still it cannot happen anymore. Now it's like it's even fun to walk with your own mind or with somebody else's mind a little bit for a while, and then you say, okay, bye, it's enough for me. Then you go back where you were, like you play with your own mind as if you're just playing with a puppy, and sometimes it becomes a wild stallion, and you play with it like that. But it's always the playing with your own thoughts.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite say it with your own, but I understand what you mean. Just because my language is always to be the negative, but everyone uses different language.
How would you say it?
I would just say that playing just begins to happen. Yeah. Playing was always happening, but this personal energy was trying to stop the playing, and then it's just play happening. Yeah. But then somebody else would say, I mean, it's just nothing happening. The next body would go, it's nothing happening, Lisa. Oh, yes. It doesn't really matter how you say it. Everyone has their own language. And then this beaming happens. This knowing, like, that's all this is bullshit. This boundlessness.
Yeah.
And then that's gone. All that conversation never happened.
Yeah.
It's so exciting, non-duality.
Please contain it.
Yeah. So I think it's coming up to lunchtime. Maybe in another hour, lunchtime.
Yeah.
Don't know who's cooking lunch.
About an hour.
About
an hour 15 minutes.
An hour and 15 minutes for lunch.
Wow.
And then also there's lovely, beautiful walks around this area. Is there a lake and something and forest?
A lake?
Yeah.
Well, many do.
Many lakes, yeah. Yeah.
You can swim.
And swimming and forests. But I don't really know them. I only know the walks around this area, so I'm maybe not the best. We can just look at Leon swimming.
Oh, in the cold, thank
I know a good one from last time I was here.
Yeah?
But you have to go back up, so maybe when I go, could be 3 people more.
You have to drive then?
Yeah. There's a beautiful route for walking and bicycling, but we can with 2 or 3 cars, people put off and then they walk, and an hour we can take them again in the car. But it's just beautiful lakes.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
And we walk along lakes and you see horses, wild horses and so on.
Wild horses?
The other side of Neruda.
Well, maybe if people want to go, maybe we can maybe go at 3 o'clock? 3,
Today?
4, 5, yeah.
And I have to click.
You have to click. Well, we don't have to. If there's an energy that goes towards it, and then some people that have a car, we just need cars. So, if not, then it's a restful afternoon.
People who walk very long distances can walk that, but normally it's the bicycle route.
You go around it.
It's beautiful, eh?
Very nice. And so then the next talk will start at 5. So we've got 5 hours. Lunch. Walk maybe.
There are 3 bicycles
yeah.
for people who want to bike.
There's 3 bicycles?
3 bicycles.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Bye guys!
Ja,